Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to welcome you to our June Shoalo Unified School District Board meeting. We're grateful that you're here. We're grateful that you're watching on the internet and on cable. Be a good chance to say thanks to City 4 Television too for all they do for us. We'll call this meeting to order. Mr. Perkins will offer the Pledge of Allegiance, and Mrs. Anderson will offer the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, thank you for this beautiful day, for the opportunity for us to gather together and celebrate the achievements of our district. Be with us as a board, administration, and stakeholders as we look to the future for the vision of our district, both short-term and long-term. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
I second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. 1.2, superintendent reports to include comments on extracurricular activities, curriculum, and current events.
I don't know if you heard last week the big sigh of relief and all the air go out of the city. That was the teachers' sigh of relief that the school year was over and the kids get to celebrate their summer. So we are now full on into our summer planning activities. We've got all kinds of things coming on in July. We'll have our camps are hitting our campuses. We're making plans and arrangements for next year. The AZ merit data has come out. It's still embargoed, so we can't share it quite yet. But as soon as it's unembargoed, we'll share out those details of the AZ merit scores, and should be good news. But that's about all that we have to report right now. Is we're just moving forward with the fast and furious months of summer. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping you would include that you were babysitting my children over the summer, but that's not part of your meeting. All right, 1.3, approval of public auction on July 14th, 2017. Mr. Schubert or Mr. Housley?
this is an auction that we have every year, and it's set for July 14th. It's to help, I guess you could say, get rid of the stuff that's beyond its usable nature to the district, and because it was public or purchased with public funds, we have to auction it off, and so that auction will happen mid-July.
Where's that going to be held?
The auction itself will be held in the maintenance yard. It'll have a preview of items starting at 8 a.m. and the auction itself would start at 9 a.m.
Great. So we invite the public to come out on
Absolutely.
that day and participate in that. Thank you. 1.4, call to the audience.
We need to
Make a
approve
motion.
that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve the public auction.
I second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes. Okay, I apologize. 1.4, call to the audience. Now we're ready. Do we have any requests? No requests? Thank you. 1.5, future board agenda items. Anybody have anything they want to discuss in the future?
I don't have any.
No? Okay. Thank you. 2.1, approval of overnight out-of-state travel. Mr. Housley.
We got a couple of things here for your consideration. Mr. Adams is recommending the approval of 4 student council students as well as 2 teachers to attend the League of Cities Youth Program in Oro Valley. That's in the Tucson area, August 22nd through 23rd. Expenses, except for the travel, will be paid by the city of Show Low. Thank you for that. Also, Mr. Hall is requesting approval for all fifth grade students and teachers to attend Friendly Pines in Prescott, March 27th through 28th, and that's of 2018. They'll charter a bus for the transportation and fundraising, tax credit, and other things like the Show Low Youth Foundation will help support that trip. Baseball is also looking to go to a tournament in Flagstaff and Tempe, possible overnight travel or overnight stay with expenses covered by the baseball club. And Joe Matthews, the head baseball coach, is overseeing that trip. That would be June 16th and 17th. It's my recommendation that we approve these overnight and out-of-state travel.
I'll motion for the approval of overnight and out-of-state travel.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item 3.1, approval of resignations. Mr. Housley.
I'm seeking your approval of the following resignations. Joseph Scott Clark as a high school teacher assistant. That was effective May 10th. Maria Kilber as a kindergarten teacher. Nathan Adams as the Linden music and PE teacher. Vicki Hall as the Whipple Ranch reading specialist. Josie Miller as a Whipple Ranch first grade teacher. And Cammie Hall as a Whipple Ranch teacher assistant. I would recommend the approval of these resignations as presented.
Is this where we, no? Okay.
I motion for the approval of resignations as presented.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 3.2, approval of new hires and transfers. Mr. Housley.
The following individuals have been invited to come to work with Show Low Schools. Angela Blaylock as a Nicholas Homestead fifth grade teacher. Annette Einfeld as a Whipple Ranch second grade teacher. Lori Rice as a junior high fast forward teacher. Beverly Boyd as a high school special ed teacher. Valerie Laura as a Whipple Ranch kindergarten teacher. Gary Paul Whipple as a high school math teacher. Mike Brogan as a high school math teacher. And Tyson Adams as a high school English teacher. Also for your consideration are transfers. Jessica Connor from Whipple Ranch kindergarten teacher, half-time to a Linden PE teacher, and that's 0.4 FTE. Jodelle Roten as a junior high school science teacher, from science to junior high special ed. Karen Hall from Whipple Ranch second grade teacher to a junior high special ed teacher. Nedra Parker from Nicholas Homestead special education teacher assistant to a Nicholas Homestead fast forward teacher assistant. And Heather Douglas from Whipple Ranch kindergarten teacher to a reading interventionist at the Whipple Ranch. I would recommend the approval of these new hires and transfers and staff class reclassifications as presented.
I recommend approval of new hires transfers as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 3.3, approval of certified and classified substitutes. Pay will be in accordance with the approved salary schedule and board policy. Mr. Housley.
We have some classified employees. Typically, you'll see these who work during this for summer employment. Don Young as a substitute teacher assistant. Israel Chavez as a summer food service worker. Gail Tyler as a summer food service worker. Anna Likens, Tori Marsh, and Andrea Price as a summer food service worker. I'd like to recommend the approval of these substitute employees.
I'll make a motion to approve the substitutes as presented.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.4, approval of stipends and volunteers. Mr. Housley.
I'm not sure if we have this to put up or not, but there are a lot of
Yeah,
names.
you don't need to read all.
So I won't read them all. This will be available if someone wanted to look at the list for sure. That'll be available after the board meeting. But I do recommend the approval of the following stipends and volunteers to be paid in accordance to board-approved salary schedules.
I make a motion to approve the 3-page list of approved stipends and volunteers and everything else that's listed here.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item 3.5, consideration and approval of recommendation concerning liquidated damages in accordance with T4 of Certified Teacher's Contract for teacher Josie Miller. Mr. Housley.
Just for the board's information, in accordance to paragraph T4 in the teacher contract, there is a liquidated damages clause that states that the board, if there is a termination of contract on the employee's part, that a separation from that contract, that there could be up to $2,500 in liquidated damages assessed. As such, Mrs. Miller has requested to be removed from her contract obligations for the 17-18 school year. And so that's this item, and we bring that to your to the board tonight. That is at the board's discretion to make that determination of where that liquidated damages would be and where it falls in there. So that's what this item is for.
So my understanding is we have already recovered the liquidated damages.
Yes.
And so I would entertain any discussion that anybody would like to have, any opinion, thoughts, feelings on this subject.
Mr. Housley, have we filled this position?
We currently have people that we're interviewing for this position.
How much of a loss will it put the district at by the termination of the contract at this point?
Excuse me?
How much of a loss will it put the district at by terminating the contract at this point?
At this point, it's early in the year, so the actual loss to the district is minimized because it is early, and we did have candidates for the position, so it is a little bit easier on the district at this time.
We won't know until interviews are held, even if any of those candidates are someone we want to hire.
That's true. We feel pretty confident about some of the applicants that we have, but you're right. Until we go through the process, we wouldn't really know.
So by virtue of the application and accompanying resume, you're saying that they seem to be good qualified folk that.
Yeah, we seem to have some candidates who will work out fine for us.
Just to remind our community, we did just pass a couple months ago a resolution to follow our contract in regards to this.
To follow our policy
Our policy, yeah.
in regards to the T4 section of the contract.
Mr. Housley, what's the procedure if we reduce the 2,500 amount? How does that work?
If you were to reduce it from 2,500 to whatever it is that you choose, then the district would reimburse the amount in difference that was already collected in liquidated damages to Mrs. Miller.
it seems to me that we're in a recoverable stage, that maybe the 2,500 would be a little bit extreme.
Any thoughts, Stacy?
Yeah, I think if we have candidates, and I guess we can't talk about everything else.
I think,
This is the maximum, right? It's from 0 to 2,500.
Yes.
I have, one thought is, you know, we had talked about, if there was a hardship on a person, you know, typically what really hurts us in the middle of a year when we have a situation like this, and it's not in that, we're not in that position, obviously. I think that, I think there's a balance here between the hardship that may be felt and the hardship on us. What are your thoughts? Are you tell me what you're thinking? Make a proposal or whatever, and we'll see where we can go, if we can all come to an agreement. If we feel that the 2,500, the full amount, is what we need to do, then we need to discuss that. If it's less than that, then we need to discuss that and come to an agreement. I mean, it sounds like you're leaning towards this may be a little bit excessive, and we can recover with not such a great amount. Am I hearing you, feeling you, right?
Amy?
Amy, they're asking if you have any comments.
I think that she signed her contract knowing full well what was in place, and I'm not aware of any hardship on her part, unless you guys have talked about it and I just couldn't hear it. But it's already been assessed, so I don't understand why it's brought again to us.
It's assessed, and then you have the ability to change that. It's going to be assessed initially, though.
I would say assess it. That's my vote. Maybe that's hard, but I think that was in the contract, and she signed to the contract.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'm leaning a little bit more to some leniency on it. I think we're at a point where we can recover and move on, and that's where I'm coming from.
So, pick your poison. What amount do you want to either return to her, or what amount do you want? It's already, the 2,500 has already been assessed. So our decision today is to return to her a portion of that, or leave intact the assessment. So where are you looking?
I don't know what a fair amount would be as far as that goes. How much time do the administrators put into interviewing and for the one position? There were 2 other positions, is that correct?
It would be hard to quantitate that at this time.
Right.
What I don't want to do is, I don't want to table this and draw this out
No.
any longer for her or for us. So
The minimum half.
Personally, I tend to feel a little more like Amy feels, but maybe not quite. I'm willing to budge here, if that's the right word. I'm willing to meet somewhere and help her in her separation from us. I'm willing to do that, but I'm not sure that I know where we want to be. Amy says all the way, you say not all the way, but
In the middle.
in the middle, you want to meet in the middle, or you want them 3/4, where you're being quiet?
Yeah, why don't we,
Help
I'll make a motion to return $1,000 to the employee.
I
What
would
did
say-
she say?
She motioned to return $1,000 to come, or to not assess 2,500, rather 1,500.
I would second
I'm
that.
fine with that, but why that amount? I just couldn't hear what some of the people were saying.
There was conversation about the amount of time that's gone into hiring and just some general conversation about not wanting to necessarily be at the full end, but kind of in the middle of where things are.
Is she aware we had executive session before?
Have we replaced her?
We're in the process of.
And Amy, where I'm coming from in that is, this particular teacher is the breadwinner in this family, and so there is somewhat of a hardship.
Did you hear that?
I did.
Okay.
I thought she also got a job someplace else.
That hasn't been discussed here.
Okay.
I would make a second on Pam's motion.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this? Amy, do you have anything else to, we have a motion and a second. Do you have any other comments or discussion?
I would agree with Pam.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sounds like motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And on to 4.1, approval of a second viewing and adoption of following policy advisories, number 567 through 587.
These are policies that you've reviewed in a first reading. This is the second reading. So these are for adoption. Most of them are just general change provisions to meet the new statutes, or to create have the verbiage go around what the new statutes say. So there's nothing real major in change to these. I would recommend that we approve these policy advisories as outlined.
I'll make a motion to approve the second viewing on adoption of policy advisories as presented.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Sounds like that was unanimous. Item 5.1, approval of updated letter of declaration authorizing district to maintain a line of credit with Wells Fargo through Navajo County Treasurer. Mr. Schubert?
So after our last meeting, we got another notice from Wells Fargo that they needed another document signed. And it's a document that authorizes me to go ahead and access our line of credit as needed. So we just need your approvals for that letter of declaration.
I motion for the approval of the declaration as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Quick question.
Yes, sir.
When you are in need of that, if and when you're in need of that, that comes before board for board approval?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
We just go ahead and that's what you're doing tonight, is you're approving us to use it as it is needed.
Okay,
And that use usually happens September, when we haven't had a lot of collections from the county. And we use that money to cover our payroll expenses and our outgoing
and
expenses
this is something we do every year?
every year.
Okay, great. I just wanted that clarification. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. 5.2, approval of Dodd, Ridge and Company PC as district auditors for fiscal year 2016-17. Mr. Schubert.
We currently have a 5-year agreement with Dobridge and Company to do our annual financial audits. We are in the second year of that agreement, and this is an opportunity for you to go ahead and approve us to continue to use Dobridge and Associates as our auditors.
Did I mispronounce that? I think I said Doddridge. I apologize. I think when I read it before, I think I got it right. I apologize. Doddridge. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the Dobridge and Company audit contract.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 5.3, presentation by Morgan Brown recommending the governing board call for a capital bond election. Mr. Housen.
I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Brown as he's going to do the presentation here.
Good evening, Mr. Housley and board. Pleasure to be here with you. I first want to say that and congratulate you. Today I had to go on your website and find some information, and it was a pleasant surprise to see that your website was revised and very easy to navigate. So thank you for that. I know that was an issue when Mr. Housley came, and I applaud him for moving forward and getting that done, because I think that's a great way to get the information out to the community. So we're here tonight to call for a bond election for capital items. We met as a citizens committee and kind of went through and prioritized what we thought was important for the community and moving the school district forward and getting some things repaired and or replaced around the school district. And as this committee reviewed and went through these items, they identified several priorities. I think you guys already have this booklet, but for those that are watching or on the TV, I just want to identify a few of those priorities. Obviously, the school district is here to educate children, but another priority is the safety and security of our students while they're at the school, and there's a number of issues that we feel need to be improved in that area, and it's going to take some money to do that. And the way to get that accomplished and done in an expedited manner is to have this bond election. But Mr. Schubert, if you can pull up the next few slides, I just want to go through a couple of the items that we identified as these 4 priorities. And if you want to go to I think there's a slide that shows some pictures. There we go. So as we indicated, safety and security is one of the things that we need to improve, and we've identified some areas like the student drop-off and pickup points that need to be fixed for traffic flow and safety of our students. There's some there by the junior high. I know that there's already some work being done on the one in front of the junior high as well. And then if you'll scroll down a little bit, we want to also improve and have some surveillance equipment where we can keep an eye on some of the stuff going on in the district. Our fire alarm system at the junior high, my understanding is outdated and needs to be repaired. And then you can see some of our parking surfaces there. That's a great picture. So those are some areas that we feel like is important. Moving on just a little bit to the next item would be our buses and transportation system. If you notice that middle graph there, I think the number is there's 59% of our buses that are in fair to poor to very poor condition. And that's concerning. I think almost all the buses, if we go down a little bit farther to show up, have over 100,000 miles. As a parent, I know I've gotten a call several times about 11 or 12 at night from my student that's there that says, we broke down and we're not going to be home for another 2 or 3 hours. And depending on where they break down, that's a concern. That's a safety concern and a security concern as well. But it also puts a tremendous stress on the teachers or the leaders that are there to oversee the 30, 40, 50 students for a couple hours, make sure that they're okay. So we feel the buses and transportation system really needs to be upgraded. That also, if you go down just a little bit farther, Mr. Schubert, there's some also that talks about just I'm not sure exactly what you guys call it, but the regular vans and transport vehicles are also very old, and some of them have a lot of damage to them, a lot of mileage on them. And moving on to another area of concern is the technology in our district. There's some of the vans. some of the buses that have some damage on them. And some of the mileage numbers there. So moving on to the technology, as we know, our society is becoming more and more dependent on technology. It's becoming an area that is really moving at a rapid pace. We need to keep up with that. I was once at a conference where Michael Crow, who's the president of ASU, talked about the need for to be competitive in a global marketplace. We're not just competing with people in Arizona or Show Low, we're competing with students around the world for good jobs and understanding the technology as we move forward. And it's hard to do that when if you'll see on that slide, most of your equipment is 5 to 10 to 20, some of them even 15 or 20 years old. And we're putting that in our classrooms. We need to really keep up with the technology and the processes as we move forward. So we would look at trying to put in the classroom some increased technology in the classroom for the students. And my understanding is, and my wife tells me this, that sometimes there's not even enough computers to go around when they're doing the testing. And that's really a concern and a problem when we're going to do these testing. And a lot of our money comes from the testing and so forth. We need to have the computers in the classroom to make sure that every student can take a test on a computer. But also it just increases student accessibility. I think there's some improvements that need to be done to our network system as well that's somewhat costly, and so we would add this into the need for the capital override. And the last items that we had there was some facilities improvements. One of the things, there's a great, stop right there, Mr. Schubert. That's one of the things I wanted to point out is, if you can look at that little chart in the middle, this was the 5-year capital budget allocation going back to 2012. And you can see from the state, we used to get in the neighborhood of 450,000 or so. Now, in this current fiscal year, I think it's down, is this correct, Mr. Schubert, down to 161,000?
For the current fiscal year.
And that's a huge concern. I mean, I don't know what you can do for 161,000 in capital. There's not much that you can do, and the state has really cut back on that and really pushing most of the capital stuff to the local taxpayers and the district. So that's a concern there. But we need to do some replacements on some of our buildings for a lot of items. I know we have HVAC concerns, I believe, at the junior high and Nicholas Homestead schools. We have windows that are really old that they just don't seal in. The air conditioning or the heating and have large gaps in them. We have lighting that's 20, 30, 40 years old. And this is really an area where I think if we put some money to it, we could really see some great efficiencies in the LED lighting if we replace it. And in getting the windows replaced, it'll actually save us money within a few years and probably pay for itself and within just a few years of doing those improvements. So maybe if you scroll down, there's a couple more pictures there, Mr. Schubert, that just kind of show the need. This is, ceiling tiles falling off, old floors. I believe there's a picture of the sidewalk in front of the, I think that's in front of the gymnasium entrance there. There's leaking roofs at the junior high. So just some areas that really need some concern in our district, and we want our students to be able to be in a safe place, but also to have facilities and grounds that look good. As a Show Low is a place to come and live and educate your children and have a safe place. So I think we're asking tonight if you'll pass the resolution calling for the election in November. It's a $10 million bond. I think it's time for our community to invest in education. Mr. Reeder's going to show you some slides that show that we haven't passed a bond for a long time, and it's I think over 20 years, and it's time that we do that. We put it off too long, and I guess the philosophy is we can put it off, but it's just going to be our children or grandchildren who end up paying for it somewhere down the road. So it's time for us to step up as a community and make these improvements. I want to say something about the teachers and administrators who do a tremendous job with limited resources. They've been doing that for 10 years on limited resources, and it's amazing to me that they can still educate the children and get them to these high achievement and scores with as little as we put into our educational system. And we just feel it's time for us to address these needs. One of the things I want to say is that by addressing these capital needs, Mr. Schubert can correct me if I'm wrong, but it frees up other maintenance and operations money that we can use to maintain the things to begin with, and so we don't run into these problems. If we see a sidewalk crack, we can fix it right away rather than waiting 10 or 15 or 20 years. And it frees up some of that, but it also frees up other monies to put in the classroom. And so with the support of the board, we hopefully that you're on board and supporting us and going out into the community and making sure that we can push forward. We'll have a citizens, I think, committee that'll get together to raise funds and push for the passage of this in the election in November. And I'll be glad to answer any questions, but appreciate your time tonight and passing that resolution.
I have a question. Can you scroll? Yeah, I guess you're going down. Right there, that picture on the right, what is that depicting there? Where it says NHE ceiling tiles fell from the gym roof.
So at one point in the school year, not this last school year, but I believe the year prior, that's in the gymnasium, and all of those white tiles that are there fell from the roof over the gymnasium floor.
So those are replaced tiles?
So those are replaced, and then in order to keep them from falling, we had to put furring strips across the whole top. So that's what the top piece is. There is a 1x4 furring strips to help keep the rest of the gym roof from falling in. Roof tiles, not the roof itself.
Were those furring strips, I assumed, attached to the bottom cord of trusses or something of that sort?
I'm not sure what they're attached to.
I think they went for several months without a classroom, without the gymnasium before they came up with that solution.
Mr. Morgan, will any of these funds be used towards salaries, or this is just capital funds?
It's all for capital. My understanding is when you do the bond, you have to identify what it's going to be used for, and this is going to be all for these capital items in these 4 areas.
Thanks for clarifying.
In fact, Mrs. Lizardi, the bond money cannot be used for salaries. That's part of the bond itself.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, we have Mr. Mark Reeder here that can give more information for the board on what a bond means and what it would mean to our community. If you'd like to invite him to come and share at this time before you discuss it further, that would be great.
Please do. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Good evening. Mr. President, members of the board, good afternoon, good evening. Mark Reeder, I'm with the investment banking firm Stifel Nicholas, and we've been retained by the district to be your bond firm, your underwriter. And so we've been working closely with staff with regard to the projects that were just introduced to you and putting together a lot of analysis I'm going to share with you here in a moment. I'm here this evening to educate you, and once we're done with that, and once we're done with any questions you might have, there is a resolution in front of you that I can also walk you through as well. As mentioned, this is a bond issue. Bonds are issued by a school district for the purpose of capital improvements only. And you probably agree that school finance is rather complicated, especially on the budget side of the equation. I know you just went through your budget. And the state of Arizona makes our school finance system very complicated, especially on the operating budget side of the equation. On the capital side of the equation, it's pretty easy, okay? The challenge with our school districts the last several years, as mentioned by Mr. Brown, is in the past, the state would provide capital dollars to our school districts throughout the state so you can make some of these needed improvements. And we have a slide in here, and it was already reflected that your capital dollars directly from the state that come back to the school district are dwindling. You're down to about $150,000 this budget year. And so what's happening around the state is that many school districts are having to call local bond elections and increase their property taxes to pay for those improvements, whereas the state had assisted in doing that in the past. Does that make sense? So the legislature, as you all know, is proud of themselves of reducing taxes. But when they reduce taxes, there's less money to go back to our K-12 system, fair? And then what happens is all of us that live in a school district, it's forcing more school bonds and it's raising taxes. So I'm not really sure, not to get political here, I'm not really sure what's really accomplished in that regard. Okay, so what I'm going to do here real quick is spend some time with you. And Greg, are you going to walk me through these on the, can you, or do I do it?
I got it.
You got it, okay. So on page 4, real quick, we've already showed that to you. That's the dwindling capital dollars that Shoalo Unified's been getting. On page 5, bottom right-hand corner, this is a really busy graph. I apologize for that. But basically, when we issue bonds, and bonds are really no different than a loan. It's just, it's basically what we're doing is we're going to sell a loan in the marketplace. You're going to borrow, in this case, if you adopt the resolution, $10 million. And you're going to pay that $10 million back probably over a 15-year period of time like you would a loan. And you're going to levy a property tax every year. I'm going to show you that in a moment. And you're going to levy taxes sufficient to pay that loan back or to pay that bond back. It's all within the confines of your tax base. And this is a chart here that shows you kind of a 10-year history, left to right, going through the Great Recession. And I'll just take you all the way over to the right-hand side, which basically the blue line or the orange line, again, this is back to where school finance is super complicated. But if you look on the far right-hand corner, the district has been fortunate the last couple years coming out of the recession. We're starting to get growth again in your district. And you can see somewhere around 4 to 5% growth over the last couple years, which is all in all positive, because as your tax base grows over time with a fixed amount of debt service, more people will help pay the bond back. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So for every dollar of taxes that your school district levies for capital, and capital is a secondary property tax, not a primary property tax that you're very familiar with on your operating budget. But this is a pie chart that shows for every dollar of taxes levied for a bond issue, for example, 67% of those taxes will be repaid by residential property. You're still largely a residential property tax base, 20% commercial and industrial, and you still have an agricultural and vacant land tax base of around 13%. Okay? Wanted to share that with you. On your tax rates, another very busy slide. Your bond's been paid off, I think this 16-17 has been paid off for a couple of years. The last time you issued bonds was way back in 1997, and I was privileged to work with you, and Kelly will share that with you. That was a smaller bond that was passed to do some improvements, and the district has, as you can tell with the blue line there, successfully paid that off. You also don't have an override, to my knowledge, for the operating side, which tells me that you run pretty lean and mean and pretty efficient. I would say probably 2/3 of our school districts around the state have an override on the budget side of the equation. So you've done a good job of managing your resources primarily through your primary property tax levy and your state aid. So we wanted to share with you that your tax rate is gone down the last couple of years, as you can see in the green line, primarily as a result of reduction of your your override that went off the books in 13-14 and your bond that went off the books in 16-17. So I would say you've done a really good job of keeping your tax rate very manageable and even down from a high of 550, as you can see there. This is a slide here getting back to where, as a result of the legislature not allocating capital dollars back to our K-12 districts, all of the bond elections really over the last several years through the recession way back in 2003, you can see, for example, back when the recession hit, you can see in 2007, this is statewide about $500 million. This last year, November of 2016, and school districts can only call a bond election in November in our state. In 2016, as you can see the big blue line there was $1.1 billion of voter authorized general obligation bonds for capital improvements for our state, statewide. We're getting ready for the November of 17, as you are tonight, and I think we added up the other night, I think we're probably going to be close to about $1.2 billion or $1.3 billion statewide this year. So you can see they're growing for the reasons that we mentioned to you. Good for our business, but obviously taxes in our school districts are having to creep up as a result. Okay, page 9. Under Arizona law, you have a debt limit, and your debt limit is $39.7 million. I'm rounding up, not that you're considering that amount of bonds for your capital improvements, because as I understand it, you're about 10 million is the request for your consideration this evening. So just so you know, your debt limit is about 40 million. You're going to ask for about 10. Okay, so let's get into the fun part. And on page 11, it's fairly simple math here. $10 million bond issue, if passed in November, sold by the Show Low Unified School District, probably first or second quarter of 2018, after the election. Level debt service, I assumed 5%. Okay, if you sold bonds today, you'd probably be 3.5 to 3.75 because we're still in a very, very low interest rate environment, as you're probably aware. But to be conservative, we've assumed a 5% level debt service in column 5 at about $935,000 per year in your tax levy. Applied to your tax base in column 2, calculates out at about 50 cents per $100 of assessed value. So pretty reasonable, I'm sure you would agree. Okay, now, and this is information that will be included in your voter information pamphlet, which I want to chat with you about briefly tonight. So go to page 13, and what we do is we take that 48-cent tax rate and we apply it to the value of a residential home. And in this case, in bold letters there, the $102,000 value, it's the county value, not market value, is the average county value, if you will, of a residential home within the boundaries of the Show Low Unified School District. Okay, you've got some obviously a lot higher than that, you have some that are lower than that, but using the average as an example, we're calculating the monthly cost to support a $10 million bond at about $4.16 a month. Okay, so I would say reasonable. And we work on a lot of bond elections. I love to see a $3 to $5 a month tax rate, monthly tax cost, and people can generally feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, stomach that, right.
Okay, now the nature of property taxes, as you all know, is a function of the value of each one of our properties. Okay, and some people have multiple properties, and some properties higher than others. So it applied to the value of the home and the tax rate. So that's why we have in here, for example, the $250,000 value, and the statute requires this, that would be $10 a month. And then we got commercial and we got agricultural in here because of our complicated state law property tax system. Commercial, the average commercial property, for example, is about $200,000. In the second box there, that'd be about $14 a month to the average commercial property owner. Okay, so we were pleased all in all when we ran those numbers from our perspective. Okay, on page 15, we just kind of wanted to share how you compare with your colleagues up here in the White Mountains, and we're privileged to represent these districts as well. The Show Low Unified School District has no bonds outstanding, no secondary tax rate, and your last election was 20 years ago. Okay. Usually when I see that, I see the dilapidation of the facilities. Mm-hmm. Blue Ridge just had a successful bond, as you're probably aware, last year for about $15 million. They passed it successfully, and we just issued those bonds for them about a month ago, and they're in the process of getting those improvements done. So they got about $31 million. Their tax rate's about $1.15 per 100. And again, their last election was a year ago. Snowflake and Round Valley have about 5 to 6 million outstanding. You can see Snowflake's about $1.12, Round Valley's about 42 cents, and you can see their elections were about 10 years ago as well, and they're still paying on those bonds. So we hope that slide might be helpful to you as you compare to some of your peers up here in the White Mountains. On page 16, there's several things going on, assuming you adopt the resolution tonight, that we'll be working very closely with staff on. relative to working with the county to conduct the election, the preparation of a voter information pamphlet, the solicitation of pro and con arguments. And we have several deadlines coming, and so if the resolution is adopted tonight, we're all going to be working together, really in the next 3 to 4 weeks to make sure we don't miss any deadlines, so forth and so on. On that front, I wanted to pass and share with you kind of a sample voter information pamphlet, which I hope you find helpful. And this is just one that we did for Sierra Vista Unified School District down south of Tucson. And I got copies here, sorry about that, for the board. In your district, this is what we're going to be working on the next 2 or 3 weeks. This will be mailed out to the voters. Obviously, you want to be transparent to the voters. It lists a lot of the information we discussed tonight. It'll have the ballot question, things of that nature. It's a very informative document driven by state statute, very transparent. And what I wanted to point out to you is the solicitation of pro and con arguments in your community. And this will be advertised, if you go back to page 7, and your school board can also provide a pro or con argument with respect to the election, and I think you can do it individually if you want. So I wanted to share this with you as a sample as we start to prepare for the solicitation of pro and con, as there'll be a deadline, I want to say, in about 45 days. So we'll be working on that for you. Going forward, I guess, on the PowerPoint, Greg, just a few other topics here. I think it's, maybe it's not. Is that the end of it? There we go. Section 3, we have frequently asked questions on bonds. I've tried to be helpful tonight. Go on page 18 is a lot of detail. When you go home tonight, if you want to read all about school finance, I'm not going to get into it tonight. A lot of that stuff you've seen before. Page 19, more information. 20. These are basically Q&As, a question and answer for you. Maybe the third question down, you have 10 years after the election to issue your bonds, which is not going to be a problem for you. If the election is successful, you'll have $10 million of voter-approved money. There'll be an annual meeting required to continue to be transparent with your voters, which we know you will be, so that you can do what you told the voters that you're going to do. So the rest of this really is just information for your perusal in the event you're interested that we wanted to share with you. With that, I'm glad to answer any questions. And then again, as I said, once we're done with that, I wanted to kind of walk you through the resolution, and then we'll be pretty much wrapped up.
First of all, I really wanted to express appreciation for putting this together in such an easy, understandable way. I really appreciate that. You were going to say something, sorry.
Yeah, and I agree, very much so, John. I just had one question, I guess probably from Mr. Schubert or for the committee or Mr. Housley. I see that Blue Ridge went for 31 million and we're going for 10. Is there a reason why we're not going to go for more, or is that how much we need? I mean,
I can't speak to Blue Ridge. If you
But
wanted to
obviously-
speak to Blue Ridge, where their bonds are, they went for 15 million, I know that, but.
Fair question. They, like you all, have probably improvements that probably exceeded that.
yeah,
Similar pictures with all kinds of, problems.
right,
And I think they were trying to be measured and granular and thoughtful. None of us can take a bond election for granted anymore, most
No.
certainly. And your district has historically been sometimes, challenging to get a bond election passed. Hopefully this time you'll get that support. So since we can't take an election for granted, the thought on a lot of districts is let's be measured, let's be conservative. And then maybe you got to go back out sooner than 20 years next time. So maybe you start with 10, and maybe 5 years from now, frankly, you're going to have to go back out. We just don't know.
right,
The state's probably not going to bail us out on capital. I
Right.
think we can probably all agree with that. So I think that's how I would answer that question.
okay,
10 million doesn't go very far anymore. And I
No.
know it's a lot of money, but it doesn't go very far.
Not
So
with
it's a
that
good-
list.
It's a very fair question. But that's the numbers that we've been running.
And as we looked at our facilities, we have about $176 million valuation.
Mhm.
10 million is a modest portion of that 176 million. We felt like it will meet our needs, and while it is a burden, we don't want to, like Mr. Reader said, we wanted it to be measured and really see what our major needs are, resolve those concerns first, and not feel like we need to ask for the whole boat. You know,
Okay.
we want to take care of the things that need to be taken care of.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the compliments. Going to the resolution, if you have that in front of you in your packets, which I believe that
Yeah,
you
we do.
Mr. Housley. This was prepared by your bond attorney, Gus Rosenfeld, and it complies with all state law relative to a school board calling for a bond election. A lot of legalese in here that I'm not really going to get into. What I thought I would do maybe is take you back to A1, which is the sample ballot. And of course, this will be included in the voter information pamphlet that we've been talking about this evening. And this is a kind of an all-encompassing ballot question that gives you the legal authority to spend $10 million in bond money, pretty much as outlined in the voter information pamphlet, which will reconcile for the most part with what Mr. Brown shared with you this evening. We'll have line items for the major projects so that the voters know what you're spending your bond money on. There's wiggle room in there in case, you know, there's some cost creep or what have you. But this is a ballot question that gives us authority to do the projects. I've recommended to the district that we put in the ballot question an interest rate not to exceed 7%. That just gives us wiggle room in case, you know, something happens in the market. We always want to remain flexible in that regard. But we're probably anywhere 3 to 5% money now, as mentioned. So that's probably higher than it needs to be, but gives us a little protection. It's got the $10 million amount in there, and we are going to limit the amortization to 15 years. And we spent a lot of time with staff on that, and we know that your community would likely want to have that bond paid back as soon as possible, but at the same time, let future generations help pay for some of your capital improvements. So you can go 20 if you want, but for purposes of all the numbers and all the planning, we went ahead with the 15-year time frame. So really, that's about it, Mr. President, members of the board, and I'm here to answer any more questions, and if not, you can go ahead and proceed with the call for the election.
I'm curious, as we've looked at this, these immediate needs, have we, I know every time I get into a project at home, it ends up costing me a little more than I thought it was because underneath it's a little uglier than I thought it was. Have we given ourselves a little movement there, or are we pretty tight on?
Well, things with like technology and transportation, we're pretty solid with those numbers.
Yeah.
When we get into facilities, like you said, sometimes you unwrap the core and you find out that it's a bad apple, right? And so there are some contingencies there. We're in the process of doing some evaluations with our roofing systems. We're looking to get some evaluations of our paint systems to see where it's actually not watertight anymore. So we're approaching those things so we know exactly what it is. I've had some engineers and architects come in to look at our HVAC systems to kind of give us an idea of where we are foundationally, where we would want to look. And so they're exploring multiple options right now on what those might look like, most cost effective, best for our mountain situation, and give us the biggest bang for our dollars. So those are the ways that we're evaluating those things right now to make sure that there aren't any surprises, although there will be. We just know that.
Another question: what if we get through this situation and we find that we only spend 9 of the 10 million? What are the options we have for that remaining million? I know I'm just throwing out numbers.
Great question. So we have a couple options. One would be to apply that $1 million back to early bond payments. Or it would be to take that $1 million and then use it to continue down our
Down
list
the
of
list.
priorities. And that would be our hope, is to continue to address priorities. As we said, 10 million may not get all the priorities, so we do have a long list, and we'll continue down the list until they're all resolved.
I don't foresee there being any issue with using it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
But I was curious.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Stacy, you have any
Thank you
questions?
very much for this.
Very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time and effort. So, any other discussion or anything on 5.3? Okay. Excuse me. Item 5.4. To consider, discuss, amend if desired, and if deemed advisable, to adopt a resolution ordering and calling a special bond election to be held in and for the district and authorizing the business manager to comply with certain sections of the Internal Revenue Code. Mr. Schubert?
So before you tonight, you have some decisions that you're able to make. You're able to decide, one, whether you want to call for the bond election or not. Within that, you can have us change this from a 15-year payback to a 20-year payback. You have the option of saying, let's not do 10 million, let's do the 39 million and change. You have a few options that are before you, but I would suggest that you approve and call it for the election as presented.
I will motion to call for the resolution as presented.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Amy, how are you doing over there?
I totally support it.
Okay. So, have a motion and a second. No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Amy, they called for the vote.
She said she was totally for it. I'm gonna take that as an aye.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we move on to 6.0. Did I skip anything? 6.0. Consent agenda. Mr. Schubert?
So tonight, we are bringing for your approvals the ratification of our expense and payroll vouchers and ratification of the junior high and high school activities and revenues and expenditures.
I make a motion for the approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. I will now entertain a motion for adjournment.
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
night.
being here this evening.
What's that?